Yes, we're talking about Small Soldiers. Got the VHS tape playing in the old VCR. You get to see that back there. I don't know kind of what the temperature is out there on this movie. I feel like I defended this movie a lot back in the day. And interestingly, this is one of those cases where I kind of have to, all these years down the road, I'm a different age, I maybe view movies a little bit, not more cynically, but with maybe just a more critical eye. I think back, I can't remember a movie that I didn't enjoy in one way or another, all growing up. I feel like I always just loved movies and always just found kind of some piece to grab onto and to be along for the ride and to enjoy, being told a story and enjoy, sort of seeing the spectacle. This is one of those cases where, coming back to it after all these years, I still think it's a good movie. I still think there's a lot of good things to talk about, and it's very interesting, especially as a Joe Dante fan. I'll talk about more of that. That'll be probably the bulk of what I want to talk about today. But coming back to Small Soldiers, it's okay. I wish I could say, oh, this is great. I wish I could say, this is one people need to come back to and, give a second, a reevaluation of. But I don't think so. I think it's just okay. For those who haven't seen it, it's a movie about a line of action figures that the new owner of this, giant conglomeration of companies, but they absorbed this toy company. The guy basically said, he looked at those sort of 90s testosterone-fueled toy commercials and said, well, what if the toy was actually as cool as it looks in the commercial? So the toy makers found, computer chips. They made the toys interactive. They made the military characters, the Commando Elite. They were going to be sort of the hunters. And then they have this line of creatures, the Gorgonites, who are supposed to hide and, be found and be defeated by the Commando Elite. So they were this super high-tech, interactive action figure line that would play toys that play back, or kind of a thing. And that's a cool idea, and it's a cool concept, and I really like the beginning where they talk about that, why isn't this toy as cool as it is in the commercial? I agree, and I like that concept. But of course, nothing ever goes right, and these learning chips that are put into these action figures are defective military chips, and these toys go crazy and run amok and become dangers to life and limb for our cast of characters. It's Joe Dante directed the Gremlins movies, and there's a lot of Gremlins vibes in this, with your little characters running amok. You can't not draw parallels to Gremlins. It's when we talk about Joe Dante movies, for me, I grew up with obviously Gremlins and Gremlins 2, the Explorers. The Burbs is one of my favorite movies of all time. Matinee is a really wonderful movie. There's Inner Space. I'm not as big a fan as Inner Space, of Inner Space, but I watched it plenty when I was a kid. I always miss, whenever I talk about Joe, I'm not talking about Howling, because that's not in this wheelhouse, but I've always felt with Joe Dante movies, especially of this year, the late 80s into, I guess, the late 90s, because I think Small Soldiers was 98. I don't see it on the back anywhere. You'll let me know if I'm wrong. But something like that. There is something very comfortable and familiar about his directing style, his visual style, the way he likes to tell these stories, where it does sort of feel like getting into your comfy recliner or wrapping yourself up in your favorite warm blanket. These movies are very, if you're a fan and you sort of speak that language, they're so comfortable, and they're all sort of Venn diagrams where when I watch Small Soldiers, I feel like there's a lot of overlap with Gremlins, but there's also a lot of overlap with the Burbs. And those are, two of my favorite movies of all time. I should say Gremlins 2 and the Burbs, I think, is more a more specifically accurate Venn diagram, if that's how we want to talk about it. But where Small Soldiers really kind of doesn't live up to the great DNA that's in it, that's going into it, is it's just very slow. And I there's something about the CG, because this is a mix of a lot of puppet work and CG. And it is not that the CG isn't good, because I think the CG is surprisingly good and matches really well to the animatronics. The problem is that it feels like Dante didn't know how to compose and direct things that weren't there. He didn't know how to shoot around something that didn't exist in the physical space. So a lot of the times when we're dealing with shots that have the computer animated toys, everything slows down. The pace of everything starts to crawl for those moments, those shots, those larger scenes. And I think it hurts it. And when you watch it, it reminds me of Explorers, because Explorers is like that too. I think Explorers I have a ton of nostalgia for it, and it's the kind of movie that when you watch as a kid, it just ignites your imagination. But watching it as an adult, it's very slow, it's very clunky, and it's the kind of story that is just not getting to the point. And I kind of feel like that with Small Soldiers. It spends a lot of time introducing... Well, first of all, it spends so much time setting up the toys, setting up their origin, setting up what is about to go wrong with them, with this military chip. It spends so much time on that piece of the big story that it's just like we're not getting to it. And we're dealing with these characters that, for most of the movie, are in their own separate world. They're like the toy designers, the toy company people. They are their kind of their own separate story. And then we're dealing with our main characters. And I would say this too, there's a lot, again, there's so many parallels to, I think, Gremlins 2 specifically, because a lot of the characters up on in the toy design side of Small Soldiers, they remind me of the characters who are working the control room of Clamp Tower, because they're the characters, something is starting to go wrong, and they don't want to acknowledge it, they don't want to admit it, they don't want to look at it, and they're just trying to turn a blind eye when we have these other characters down on the ground who are in the thick of things going wrong, and they're trying to sound the alarms, and they're trying to stop or contain, what's going wrong, what's running amok, these little creatures running amok. So I feel like kind of wasting a lot of time on that side of the story. And every time it goes back to it, it's like we know things are going wrong, and it's like we have to see these characters learning all of the things that we as the moviegoers are already seeing. So we see it, and then we have to watch a scene immediately after where other characters find out about the thing that you and I just watched. So it's like everything has to be doubled up. Everything has to take twice as long. And then I think too, it's such a slow burn of the characters getting away, the Commando Elite escaping. The kid, is his name Sam, gets in trouble with his parents because he's had issues with telling the truth, and his parents don't believe him when he says, like, these toys are... It's like the dog ate my homework. He's saying the toys wrecked the store, the toys did this, the toys did that. And we have to see so many times of the toys wrecking something, Sam getting blamed for it, his parents not believing him, and it's like, is this just at the end, is this just going to teach us the lesson? Like, his parents are going to go, oh, we should have believed you all along. Even though, legitimately, he had all kinds of issues with lying, with truthfulness, with an incident at his previous school. They've moved because he had an incident at the previous school. Like, his parents have legitimate reasons to question whether or not he's telling the truth already before he starts telling them things that sound genuinely insane. Like, they have every right to question it. So there's those logic gaps as I'm watching it. I'm like, of course, like, if I was his parent, I wouldn't believe him. And then, sorry, I'm trying to regain my thoughts. But on the other piece of the Venn diagram is the Burbs, and there is this this movie takes place in the suburbs. It's dealing with those sort of kooky suburbs characters. Phil Hartman is a great example of, the sort of obnoxious neighbor who's also obsessed with the latest and greatest, audio-visual technology, that kind of a guy. So there's the DNA of the Burbs is also mixed in, which I enjoy, but again, isn't really coming together the way that movie did. It's, in many ways, kind of an assembly of... it's sort of a Frankenstein's monster of parts of all of these much better movies that feel like they tried to combine the DNA into something else. Something that was more directly a kids movie. I think that's worth pointing out too, because movies like Gremlins and Gremlins 2, movies that are decidedly kids movies that Joe Dante makes, they don't feel like kids movies. I've never watched it for as silly as, Looney Tunes Back in Action. That was another Joe Dante movie. I knew I was gonna forget one. But even movies that he makes that are like very much a kid's movie, I don't watch them and think, like, this character is here to appeal to kids, or this is happening because kids are watching this movie. I've never felt like he dumbs down his movies or speaks down to a younger audience. I feel like he kind of makes... Because The Burbs is not a kid's movie, and The Burbs, again, feels it has this same vibe, it has this same comfy couch vibe that his other movies that are, lean more like a kid's movie or away from a kid's movie. They all interspace, not a kid's movie, but they all have this vibe, and they all feel like they're coming from the same perspective, and he's not patronizing kids. He's not talking down to kids. I will say, except maybe the exception is going to be your Small Soldiers. Small Soldiers, there are too many times where I feel like, this zany Gorgonite is here to get kids, to get a cheap laugh out of kids. There's more going on in this movie where I do start to think like, oh, this feels like someone said, you have to do this because it's a kid's movie. You have to do this because you're selling the toys. You have to do this. You have to do that. It feels more cynical than I think most Joe Dante movies. But, like, you're seeing, I put the movie at, like, kind of the best part. When this movie's good, it's as good as The Burbs, as Gremlins 2. When it is firing on all cylinders, it is great. The problem is it takes you, like, an hour to get to great. And the hour before that is okay, good, and I'm asleep. And then it's okay, and then I'm asleep. And then it's good, and then I'm asleep. And it just takes way too long to get great. And there's not enough great to call the movie great. I will say, Tommy Lee Jones as Chip Hazard is phenomenal. He has one of the greatest villain moments in any movie. And I'm saying this about a movie that I think is fine. It is an averagely okay movie, but it does have Chip Hazard. He's got Kirsten Dunst. Is it Dunst? Kirsten Dunst? It's got to be Dunst, right? Because it's not Dunst. She's not a dum-dum. But he's got her tied up. She's hot. She's their hostage, and she's obviously panicking. She's her mouth is duct taped and whatever. And Chip Hazard goes, "Are you scared?" And he leans in and he gets real quiet. And it's like only Tommy Lee Jones could deliver this line the way he delivers it. But he says, "We're all scared. You'd have to be crazy not to be scared." It's so good. I'm not doing it justice. But it's such a great line. It's probably the most memorable moment quote from the movie that I still think about, all the time. I was trying to think. I was gonna say like, oh, I quote that all the time. I don't really have cause to say that very often, but I do think of it on a fairly regular basis. So I'm not gonna say Small Soldiers needs some 2024 reevaluation. I think for everybody that's like, yeah, it's fine, that is the right attitude to have. It is a perfectly good movie. I'd be interested knowing what kids today might think of it, because it is, it has become kind of old-fashioned to, I think kids nowadays are probably very used to interactive toys and interactive apps and experiences, and I mean, things are so different now from '98 that I don't know if they would. I don't know if they would connect to it in the same way, or maybe they would. I mean, that was kind of the plot of the newest Chucky movie, wasn't it, with Aubrey Plaza, where it was like a sort of interactive AI Chucky, but then it turned evil. Like, it's kind of the same concept. I would kind of maybe, I hesitate to say maybe Small Soldiers is one of those movies that could not use a reevaluation, but maybe it could use another attempt. Because I would like to say the movie, eventually Chip Hazard, it seems like they're all defeated, but Chip Hazard finds a toy store with boxes and boxes and boxes of commando elites, and he gets them all, activates them all, and so he has an instead of whatever it is, 6 commandos, he's got dozens and dozens of commandos. It would have been now, or not it would have been now, that's terrible structure, but it would be interesting now to see like a scene like that, but he was able to activate thousands of Commando Elite. Because I think the thing that this movie never really gets over the hump of is, at the end of the day, these are just little plastic toys. And I think the movie does an okay job of not getting over the top with, like, the threat of a single action figure. There's only so much they're going to be able to do. They do build, you know, vehicles, and they build flamethrowers, and they build, I forget, you know, like, their nail guns that are shooting at you. They start building weapons, but at the end of the day, like, you can just knock one, you can hit one with a golf club, and it explodes into 1,000 pieces. It would be neat to see a scenario where you are just being overwhelmed by thousands of these action figures, and even though you can grab one and snap it in half, like, at some point the numbers overwhelm you, and I think that would be neat to see. So I don't know, maybe someday someone can look at Small Soldiers and give it another shot and do it right. You know, do it. I don't want to say do it right, because there's a lot right here. I love the concept. I love the cast. When the movie's getting creative, like, and that you hit those action scenes, there's so much to like. But it's just all the pieces didn't combine into as good of a movie as I think it could have. But what do I know? I'm just sitting here talking. Let me know what you guys think. Obviously, if you made it this far into the video, please hit that subscribe button. For old Dick Miller, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.